Yazeto Jedala so and the Lapsum Namda, Mountain Jidem, Soman, Longonjo, Najo, Chokal, then Kushir, Pinze, Hakiwa, Chapal, Janzo, Shabla, so the Namda. Peme don't do the Lama in Choson Regis, Sason Chenlaba, number in Jave, Power so and the show Homen Choji, in Jepotan, and the Sumsanje, Kunjingo, and Niransam Choko, Mosut. Tavela me Shabla sowa and the Chazawadan Jujin Shabadan Jesu Iran Kujin Sowai Kewa Jose Dagi Tamjendo Bejanju Cherango Sashi Peji Chushin Metotam Rabli Jin de Jambade Sanjay Shindo Drogan Namda Yingla Jobara show. So, continuing then from the morning's chapter on perfection of samadhi, and prior to going into the sixth paramita of patience, as explained within the commentary called the garland of white flowers, based upon the root verses of Nagarjuna's letters to his spiritual friend, King Surabhi Bhadra. And so this morning we stopped at the point of talking about the four samadhis as has been mentioned within the commentary text. And then as Nagarjuna says, Jej Jawala Kedik Langdur Chirshapadan Chabarting and the Jitapapanso Losung. In the sort of summarization or the conclusion section of the paramita of samadhi, then again, meditators need to bring about a non-gap or non-separation of the essence of meditation into post-meditation. So if the meditation that one is trying to stabilize is being perfected, and as we spoke about, freeing it from all the obscurations or the distractions, the filling it with the essence of the four immeasurable qualities, and through the progression of perfection of equanimity and inculcating within it the qualities of the four samadhis. In meditation, if the meditator is successful or is exerting effort in bringing these qualities about, at the same time, it is also extremely essential that the post-meditation resemble the essence of the meditation session. Therefore, it says here, post-meditation is completely based upon or founded upon the awareness of not creating any action of body, speech, and mind that is disruption to what the mind has been able to understand in meditation. And so, meditatively, if one is trying to remain unbiased, in equanimity, full of loving kindness and compassion beyond any grasping to self, and yet if in post-meditation the actions are dissimilar, or if it is in contradiction or is a paradox, then whatever one builds up in, no matter how long or short the meditation session is, it never becomes stable enough to again become the perfect ground of union of view and action to arise. Therefore, post-meditation, in simple, it says, simply making sure that one abandons all negative actions in post-meditation is essential. In abandoning negative actions in post-meditation, one allows the permeating and the continuity of the essence of meditation to become more stabilized and to become seamless in one's mind stream. In order to safeguard one's mindfulness and bring about the perfection of samadhi, then again, primarily, the text here talks about 5 negativities that must be abandoned. Number 1 here, then it refers to actions that are performed repeatedly or constantly. In general, it says, in post-meditation, one must, if performing virtuous actions, continually perform virtuous actions. There must be continuity. And if the actions that one is generating is unvirtuous, then making sure that one abandons the continuity of negative actions. And therefore, being able to generate a sense of awareness and mindfulness, making sure that the actions are free of harming others. Primarily making sure that any habit that is there that is a cause of unhappiness or suffering for oneself and the others, harmful to oneself and the others, and since it is a habit, one performs it constantly, those habits be identified and one remove it from one's own nature. Second is then said to be negative actions that are done with great determination, with the intention to perform the negative action, knowing that you have the negative tendency, and despite knowing it, still with the wish to bring about some kind of loss or pain or harm on the others, with a very strengthened determination if harm is inflicted on others. That is also the kind of habit that meditators must ensure not to have in their mind stream. Then, Dela Rangjom Binyambo Meba is the third in the text, which is usually translated as performance of actions. One must eliminate or abandon those actions that do not have a counteragent or an antidote. And so, being able to bring about or inflict any kind of pain or cause of harm on the others that does not have the possibility of a remedy in that situation. Let's say depriving a parent of a child, for example, killing a person, killing a being, taking life of any other sentient being, bringing about some kind of harm where you do know that your actions are such that it cannot be remedified easily or it cannot be remedified at all, and knowingly, even so, inflicting harm on another sentient being is considered to be one of the negative tendencies or faults that, again, done in post-meditation, again brings about distraction and as well as destruction of the perfection of meditation. Then, furthermore, it is said being or bringing about harm on those to whom we owe the most, people whom we are indebted to. Especially in this context, it refers to teachers or Sangha members, those people whom our parents, those people who we owe a great deal in our own life, and yet due to one's own ignorance or laziness or arrogance or whatever it may be, inflicting harm or pain on them are then again considered to be the fourth fault of that which brings about destruction of the meditation, separation of post-meditation action, and the view that is generated in meditation during formal meditation. Then the fifth is said to be inflicting or bringing about harm towards those who are endowed with perfect qualities. Here again it primarily means the three jewels or the three roots, those that are objects of veneration, and yet despite that, when we inflict harm on such sentient beings or on such objects of refuge and such objects that are endowed with the qualities, this then is bringing about a kind of an attitude and a conduct that is very different and opposite to the meditation. And then again, as much as it has to do with discipline, nevertheless, the most important is the discrepancy that is there between view and action, again, as we spoke about in the morning. So no matter how much one meditates, if the actions do not reflect the view that you have worked with, that what we are trying to build up in our formal practices, then again does not bring about the fruition. And so continually generating or harboring such negativities lead to a situation quite similar to the experience of many meditators in today's times, where people do exert a lot of effort in sitting meditation or all kinds of other practices, and yet the real change and the real fruition that should be apparent is very rarely seen. And the reason is nothing other than the inability to bring about similarity in meditation and post-meditation, we can say that, or simply view and action. And so these are the 5 negativities that should be avoided by meditators, and thus in this way bring about the perfection of samadhi. Drukpa Sherabla ni de song. Sixth paramita, as is explained, is then said to be the perfection of wisdom. And so here in the beginning of the text it says, Gela dumbi tebada, tela trove tsundru, dag dang harji mignam mijebegi tembada, mibi dola zejik de tingen zindang, chörab to nyambar chebe sherabni jorle, chö chogi ngor churbada didani song. Wisdom, according to Nagarjuna in this particular text, is said to be given birth through the generation of 5 qualities. Here it says, wisdom arises from devotion. Theba is the first quality that is given here. Secondly, it says, wisdom arises from diligence or exertion. Then it says, from Themba, wisdom arises from mindfulness. And a birthplace of wisdom is concentration, single-pointed concentration, or samadhi. And fifthly, or it says, wisdom arises through understanding or realization. When these 5 qualities, certainty or confidence or devotion, diligence, then the mindfulness, concentration, as well as the understanding, these 5 gathered together, what is naturally produced as a result is then called prajna or wisdom. However, here in this context, in the commentary, it says, not any kind of devotion, but devotion to what? And here, therefore, the commentary says, devotion to nothing other than the Four Noble Truths. No wisdom can arise, that wisdom which eliminates doubt and hesitation of samsara, that wisdom which completely brings about separation or severance from samsara and samsaric tendencies, that wisdom powerful enough to subjugate all afflictions of anger, ignorance and desire, jealousy and hatred and arrogance and so forth, isn't anything but the wisdom that truly recognizes and realizes what the Buddha meant by the Four Noble Truths. And so, truly understanding Four Noble Truths, Noble Truth of suffering. What is suffering? Beyond all the different and many different levels of definition of suffering, suffering must be understood by meditators to be the utter ability to see the immense potential and quality of a human being and yet never having the possibility to put it into practice. That's the perfect or most direct understanding of suffering that needs to be recognized. And so what we are saying is, indeed, there are all kinds of suffering, and very often we say there is the hell realm suffering, and then all other kinds of realms, existences, their suffering. Human beings have their own birth, old age, sickness, and death. There are all the violence and the starvation and all the anger and different kinds of pain and hurt that is there that are suffering. Those are also one kind of suffering. But the suffering from a meditator's meditation and recognition is being able to see how every human being particularly is endowed with this absolute inner kindness and wisdom. That there is this, at any given moment we say, no reason why every human being cannot develop the best of their wisdom, their best of their human qualities, the best of contentment and harmony, happiness within one's own self. There is no reason, there is no logical reason at all as to why in this existence we have to have things like suspicion or doubt or hesitation or anger or suspicion or territoriality or jealousy or hatred, where 2 people cannot completely meet one another as genuine human beings without there being layers and layers and layers of fabrications and pretenses. Immense expectation, immense fabrication, immense pretentiousness and hypocrisy, where we've lost that very basic human nature itself. When that is recognized by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as well as those who are on the path of meditation, one understands what the Buddha actually meant when he talked about the noble truth of suffering. Suffering is that a human being cannot be a human being. Suffering is that we have to meditate to become a human being, that we have to resort to religion to become a human being, to actually learn. And so, as I said yesterday also, the irony of Buddha, one of the ways when we study Buddha Dharma, one of the ironies that we begin to realize is that how intricate and complex we've made things unnecessarily. And so until the difficult ways of contemplation and meditation and practice make us realize how much of a self-deception we've created, how much of a delusion we've created, how much submerged and drowned we are in our own self-deceptions, our deluded thoughts and our delusions and illusions, then that person is one who is not able to see. One who doesn't recognize this is not able to see the suffering. Those on the path must realize the Buddha's teachings on the Noble Truth of suffering as indicating this. And so confidence in the Four Noble Truths is beginning by realizing, oh yes, Noble Truth of suffering is what we all are inflicted with. And this suffering is generated, is given birth to by nobody else. It's not given by any other creator. It's not just randomly here that we bump into. What is happening is that ignorance, subtle ignorance, is the cause which allows this experience of suffering to be inflicted in oneself as well as in all sentient beings. And so each human being having that absolute beautiful quality within one's own self to be nothing but genuinely good, kind, and at equanimity, yet lost. And if we search a reason why we lose it, then there is actually no reason at all. And we don't know. We don't know why we do this. As we always say in our teachings, we always say, at this moment, let's not talk about the others, but all of us can definitely begin by saying, from today, I'm not going to be angry at all. Isn't it? I'm not going to be greedy at all. Let's all decide we're not going to be egoistic at all. And as we always can find out very easily, is nobody pushes you to be neurotic, isn't it? Nobody pulls you away from being mindful. There is no one who is saying, I'm not going to survive without your ego, isn't it? At the same time, even those of us who are so close to the Dhamma, for no reason at all, knowingly still accept to be deluded, accept to be egoistic, accept anger, accept dullness of the mind. Why? And we don't know why. As we say, nobody pushes us into the kleshas, it just happens. Nobody pulls us away from basic sanity to create delusion and deluded perception. It just happens. When there is that no particular reason other than an unknowing aspect, we don't know why, but we do it nevertheless. And so, for example, many people say, why should I prostrate? Give me a good reason why I should do visualizations. I don't feel connected to this practice because I don't know why I'm doing it. And then, you all go through this rigors of trying to find reason why you should be doing meditation, why you should be doing the recitations. But on the other hand, when it comes to anger, nobody looks for a reason. When it comes to duality, nobody looks for a reason. Nobody questions and says, why am I being so foolish with my life? Why am I destroying my potential? What is it that causes me to be deluded and constantly submerged in kleshas and neuroses? This not having one good reason, and yet that non-reason being so very powerful that it becomes the basis of suffering and karma of our existence called samsara, is given a very apt name, ignorance. And so there is no independent form given to a thought or any kind of a substance which is called ignorance. Nobody knows what ignorance is. Ignorance is that invisible yet formless yet powerful energy that forces us to move away from our basic awareness and sanity, that which is a natural quality of human being, to create this kind of a chaos, to create this kind of a confusion, where we have a mouth, but it can't be in control, where we have eyes to see, but it's not in control, where we have ears fully endowed with the quality of hearing, it's not in control, where it's your body, it's not in control, and where there is your own mind, nobody else's mind, your own mind, and yet nothing that it does seems to be under one's own control. Therefore, the Buddha found the most apt word, ignorance, marikpa, not knowing. And therefore, in English, when we say ignorance, I think it doesn't imply so much directly the sort of connotation of what it is. Marikpa in English, or in Tibetan, which is translated usually in English, is said to be not knowing. We don't know. And the not knowing aspect, yet a powerful aspect that has the power of creation of all deluded concepts, is then the cause of suffering. And so, first to noble truth, what we have created, such a distance from our fundamental nature, and therefore immense suffering in and around our own self. And caused by no other reason, but by the reason of this unknown power, energy, which is called not knowing or not being able to see the truth, or simply ignorance. And so these first two noble truths has to be really analyzed, seen within the mind of the meditator. As I said this morning, one of the weakest things, if we look at, despite all the diligence and all the good practices that you all do, what is it that still is the weakest thing in our mind stream, in our practice path, that which is the reason of not having the signs of accomplishment, the signs of fruition, is still a very weak understanding of the first two noble truths. So when the suffering is not really understood properly, then one doesn't really see the cause. There is no curiosity about the cause very much. And so when the first two noble truths are weak, we try to work with the third and the fourth noble truth. We want cessation of suffering, and we walk the path that leads to the cessation. But the third and the fourth noble truth are dependent upon the first two. It's built upon the ground of the first two. We walk the path, but the path is not very strong. It is very easily persuaded by lack of time, lack of inspiration, lack of enthusiasm, lack of devotion, all the different kinds of problems that we face in our practice path, where we almost seem to let our path of practice suffer from not really being able to generate the experience of fruition, mainly is because the driving force, which is the wish for cessation, is always very weak. And cessation is what we desire, definitely. But we do not desperately want it to a point where we are able to and willingly, happily give up all the negativities and engage fully into Dhamma. And so many of the teachers, particularly Khandro Rinpoche, says, when meditators resemble someone trying to cross the river by stepping in two different boats simultaneously with your 2 feet in two different boats, then you cannot do that. You'll fall in between. Like a person who may be very skilled at needlework, but then decides to sew with a two-headed needle, two-pointed needle. Then again, it gets stuck. You cannot really complete stitch the hole and complete your embroidery. In the same way, half-heartedness, partial samsara, partial nirvana, this half-heartedness is extremely, extremely difficult. And that's why, to some degree, one can then understand why in Buddhism, renunciation and going into solitude and practicing and wholeheartedly, fully in retreat and in solitude is stressed very much. And so I think very crucial subject for Western practitioners to keep in mind, because I think many people believe that they take a lot of happiness. We are also very happy, and you are also very happy in the strength of the lay community, householders doing the practices, which is remarkable compared to the Eastern householders, how much dedication you have, that you almost hold the Sangha. And the third jewel, and it is held by Western lay community, is a remarkable experience. It's increasingly and very, very deeply inspiring for all of us. However, on the other hand, we are all very skeptical also as to how you can do it, isn't it? Because the lifestyle and the sort of momentum of samsara itself is so very strong. Maybe you can do it. I couldn't do it. I don't think I would be able to do it at all. In that at some point when I think bits and pieces or progressively working towards it in the first 10, 15 years or so, it still seems to be possible. But ultimately, when we talk about the full realization, and fully abandoning samsara and fully engaging in nirvana, rowing simultaneously 2 boats with 2 different feet is going to be very difficult. And therefore, some people may be very skilled, I don't know, but it still seems like a very difficult thing. And this is then what is meant by cessation being a little bit weak, is that how desperately do you want to be free from samsara? In one's own mind, you have to at some point think, and therefore, even if it is difficult, and of course it is very difficult for many of you, but at least one thing that you can do is reduce. Reduction is very important. And so reduction here doesn't mean so much, and many people immediately reduce by giving up chairs and tables and clothes and pots and pans and so on and so forth. That is an easier thing to reduce. Reduction of plans, reduction of ideas, reduction of mind, that which speeds into thinking many things are important in your life. At a certain point, the good fortune, circumstances, the merits that you have accumulated in life provides you with a moment which you must learn to seize. And that is when, I think there's a very beautiful title, I think it's Pema's book, When Things Fall Apart. The title itself is very sweet in that when things really fall apart and you don't have many things, that's a very good opportunity to keep it that way. Therefore, sort of not try to rebuild it all up again, but taking that opportunity. And it doesn't have to really fall apart. There are moments where you don't have something to do, moments when you are alone and have no relationship, moments where children grow up, moments where you separate from your spouses, moments where you have looked around many years for a good partner, haven't found something. Then instead of concentrating on building it up all over again, take the opportunity. At that moment, simplify your life into all kinds of joyfulness. We're not saying make it bitter and sort of desolate, very sad, dejected, depressed Buddhist. That's not what we're talking about. But in being able to prioritize and see what is important at that moment. And always being able to reflect upon, how much more you can now concentrate on really strengthening the cessation of the causes that lead to suffering. And when the value of cessation is treasured, when cessation itself is really understood properly, walking on the path has more meaning to it. Otherwise, here we have this sort of a conundrum almost, where we are walking on the path, but we are not really looking for a cessation, but we want to overcome ignorance and therefore overcome suffering, but the path is weak, the cessation is sporadically there sometimes or not there. And so it's a very vague understanding, and even if there is an understanding, a very vague confidence in the Four Noble Truths. Therefore, here, confidence is said to be generating confidence or devotion to the Four Noble Truths. In the generation of devotion, real exertion of effort in the realization of the Four Noble Truths, then comes about wisdom, prajna. What is wisdom? Is not knowing something. That is knowledge, and that comes from knowledge and discriminating wisdom. Prajna paramita, the perfect wisdom, is just the result. It's just the essence itself. It is the essence of realization of truth as it is. When the truth as it is becomes clearer and clearer in the mind stream of the person, that then would be said devotion that leads to the realization of wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. And so the Four Noble Truths, thinking about it, analyzing, being able to experience as well as contemplate on the Four Noble Truths, leads to a certain, yes, this is how the Buddha meant. This is truly how it is. And so when your mind begins to click in with the idea, this is how it is, then one can say, this is then the birth of a prajna, a quality of pristine wisdom within my own self. And in order to really gain strength or give strength, again, think about it very carefully, analyze and see whether it really makes true sense or not. And if it does make true sense, then realizing that some amount of certainty, familiarity of the certainty leading to confidence is being generated. And so confidence in the Four Noble Truths is the first quality from where prajna or wisdom is generated. Then not only having the familiarity and the confidence of what the truth of suchness or the truth of as it is of the Four Noble Truths is, but generating the second quality that gives birth to clearer or more pure form of prajna, and that is diligence, the second quality. Diligence and exertion, the second quality that gives birth to prajna, also is said to be diligence in realizing the Four Noble Truths. Not just any diligence, any kind of diligence, but exertion of effort that leads to gaining more certainty, more clear awareness, more understanding and realization of the true meaning of the Four Noble Truths. So this is then the second quality that needs to be developed. Then not only should one be exerting effort in generating an awareness of the Four Noble Truths, but to also develop the third quality, and that is constant mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths. In order to really give birth to pristine wisdom or prajna paramita, perfect wisdom, generating strong mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths, a constant mindfulness, always awareness of the Four Noble Truths is necessary. So as our teachers would say is that before you make any plans, find it or develop this on the foundation of the awareness of the Four Noble Truths. Before you hope for something, always base your hope on the foundation of the mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths. Before you are trying to abandon something and do something, always find it on the foundation of the Four Noble Truths. And in short, whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever different kinds of actions of the body, speech, and mind that you are able to do, it should always, a meditator must always ensure that it is founded upon the foundation of continuous mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths. And in that continuous mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths, it gives birth to the wisdom of discrimination that is able to see things clearer, see things better, and therefore lesser and lesser discrepancy or the gap between the view and the action arises. Then concentration is the fourth quality. Here too it says, concentrating one-pointedly or taking to meditation, again, the awareness of the Four Noble Truths. And so concentration, mindfulness, and single-pointed awareness, a concentration that is not distracted at all, but single-pointedly aware of nothing but the Four Noble Truths. And so whatever you do, whatever you rest upon, being able to reflect upon the Four Noble Truths, oh, this is really truly samsara, and how we create from this ignorance, again, suffering, causes of suffering. May I be able to truly bring about, through the walking the path of the practice, bring about cessation of suffering. Is this causing suffering? Is this suffering? Is this a cause? Is this ignorance? Is this not ignorance? Is it truly a path of practice that leads to the cessation or not? Being able to single-pointedly research on the Four Noble Truths such that the fifth quality spontaneously arises, and that is truly understanding the Four Noble Truths, a wisdom that perfectly discerns and perfectly understands the Four Noble Truths. And so prajna paramita, that what we often say is the essence or the meaning of realization of the emptiness. That again is no different than the realization of the Four Noble Truths. Whether we say emptiness, realization of emptiness, whether we say realization of the primordial nature, whether we say realization of dhammata or awareness or whatever different names we may give, eventually what it only means in simple words is realization of what the Buddha meant when he taught the Four Noble Truths. And so there's an instance where we say Buddha, I personally myself always felt as a young child that the Buddha almost spoke with some kind of what I would say is non-appreciation of the human intelligence, to put it that way. As I thought he could have taught something more complex. He could have begun with the emptiness, for example. Everything is empty. If someone said Buddha began his first turning of the wheel of Dharma by stating emptiness of self and phenomena, as a young child I always thought, my, that would have made such an impact in the world, isn't it? that it would be such a fabulous topic to begin with. He didn't do that. He began very basically, there is suffering. There's a cause of suffering. And as a young child, when we spoke, especially as you all know, I grew up in a Catholic convent, trying to talk to the Catholic nuns, I often felt, it sounded like Buddha was a little bit pessimistic about our level of intelligence and understanding. So it doesn't seem like a very much respectful thing to tell another human being, did you know there was suffering? Because most people say, yes, of course I know there is suffering. There are all kinds of suffering. But on the other hand, here today, as we study Dhamma, as we ourselves try to examine and say how much of the understanding of suffering is there, then we find what the Buddha really meant was actually something very, very profound, much more profound and much more deep than someone saying everything is empty in nature. Whether it is empty in nature or not empty in nature makes no difference if the Four Noble Truths is not understood. If the Four Noble Truths is understood, understanding emptiness and the true nature isn't very difficult at all. Yes. Yes, one moment.
So that makes me wonder, there's some Buddhists who don't believe in the emptiness of phenomena, right? But they still believe in the Four Noble Truths. So is that right? So that how would their understanding of the Four Noble Truths be different?
Emptiness of self is understood by most people who adhere to the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma. And in that way, they do have an understanding of emptiness. Surely they do have. And because of that, they do obtain arahatship, the non-returners. The only thing is that they do attain Buddhahood. Realization is something that they are able to attain. Their realization is not able to extend anything beyond themselves. That is why Mahayana and the emptiness of phenomena is considered to be also very important.
So realizing the emptiness of phenomena is important for the bodhisattva ideal of saving it.
Yes,
okay.
Because if you look at how the turning of the wheel of Dhamma is explained, you see that the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma, where the Buddha taught Four Noble Truths, is in itself completely complete. There's no reason to go anything beyond that. Four Noble Truths, and then to understand the Four Noble Truths, the 12 interdependent originations. And then to challenge whether or not your understanding of the Four Noble Truths and the 12 interdependent origination is accurate, Eightfold Path is the challenge. If you're able to find that the Eightfold Noble, in following and adopting the Eightfold Path, Eightfold Right Path, there is no difficulty at all. You have no problems in being able to have right thought, right speech, right action, right concentration, mindfulness, and livelihood, and so forth. Then it is considered to be is that because of the spontaneity in which way you can then have the practice or be able to engage in the Eightfold Path, you have correctly understood the 12 Nidanas. And the 12 Nidanas is pretty much a further elaboration of the Four Noble Truths. However, in bringing up the challenge, you say, I have a very good understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and I also know how the 12 Nidanas seem to work. But I have problems with not really being able to bring 100% purity in the adopting of the Eightfold Right Path. Then it became necessary for Buddha even to then expound the second wheel of Dhamma. Second wheel of Dhamma, where he taught emptiness, as we say, is mainly again based on 3 subjects. And so when he taught about the 18 elements, the 6 senses, 6 sense consciousnesses, and the 6 sense objects, which are the 18 ayatanas, 16, 18, no? 18, no? No, 18, yes. 18 elements. And then further on that way, again, in order to further elaborate on the 12 Nidanas, he then explained the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas, that is form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. And then the challenge was 5 paths, or what is called today the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. And so if you were able to really see and have sense of being able to adopt all the 5 paths, accomplish all the 5 paths through the practice of the 37 practices, then such a person would be someone who could confidently say, yes, I understand what the Buddha meant and taught in the second turning of the wheel of Dhamma, as well, therefore, of the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma. So the first turning, Four Noble Truths particularly, is complete in its own self. When we miss that, when we know somewhat what the Buddha meant, and yet we are unable to really bring it to fruition through not being able to fully engage in the Eightfold Path, we have no other reason other option but to go deeper into an elaborate, more complex understanding, and that is where the second turning becomes very useful. And in some cases, the second turning is also, then again, very good. We understand, yes, of course, all of us are there, where we know we are able to see the consciousnesses, how it functions. We're able to see that the skandhas are also leading to emptiness. And through the cultivation of the 37 practices, we begin to see selflessness of self and selflessness of phenomena. And yet, it pretty much remains a theoretical understanding, unable to really bring about the full exhaustion, full cessation of ignorance. Then we have to no other way but to go on to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so third turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha nature, teachings on the Buddha nature, luminous nature of the mind is taught. What is Buddha, what is Dhamma, what is Sangha, what is qualities, what are activities, what is Buddha nature. These different subject matters are again further elaborated upon. Then that only is, and one should be able to see that these are more materials available to better understand second turning, to better understand first turning, to better understand actually the Four Noble Truths. So in our case, again, Buddha nature, we do know Buddha nature is luminous emptiness, but then we're still stuck, isn't it? Then Vajrayana comes into being, and then creation, and then completion, and exhaustion, and so on and so forth. And so ultimately, after 20, 30, 40 years of struggle, you finally say, oh yes, there is suffering. I must get rid of it. And that suffering was most unnecessary. It just was out of this ignorance. And the ignorance has no reason. Why should I sort of foolishly hold on to something that has no form, that has nothing to cling upon, and make it worse by clinging, not only clinging, but worsening it by accumulating millions of karma that becomes the cause of existence? May I sever ignorance. So if you understand it from the Four Noble Truths, best.
I'm not asking for more.
Yes.
My question does evolve suffering, the understanding of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I have been told that suffering is a delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Yes.
it?
Is it? No, you have to correctly understand it. All sufferings are delusions. What do you understand from that? Suffering is not happening. If you understand this to mean suffering is not there, you're only imagining things. If you understand it in that way, it's not a full correct understanding in that case. When we say suffering is delusion, you have to say, since the mind has created a delusion, it further fuels this suffering.
I see. The second question is the mind the heart? I have been
Is the mind the heart?
So that it's really, I'm not thinking with my brain, but the distractions and everything come through my heart.
Traditionally, the answer is mind is not the heart. Mind is beyond heart. But in sort of seeing how the Western word heart is, what I would say is heart is an aspect of mind. Heart is an aspect of mind that has gained more prominence than it should. Okay? All right. Yes.
Yes, I think you answered the first part of my question, but the acoustics in the room, I wasn't sure. Were you saying that if one follows Theravada fully, completely, that one could also understand completely emptiness of phenomena?
Scholastically, if you argue with this, they would always disagree. And Tibetan Buddhists are always taught to disagree with this and say that no, it is not complete, and therefore there is the need to really cultivate a sense of awareness or realization of emptiness as a totality, not only emptiness of self, but emptiness of the phenomena too. So that's a very scholastic way of looking at it. So from a scholastic perspective, let me clarify and say, only a Hinayana approach of realization may not sufficiently be absolute cessation of samsara.
You said may not, but I thought you were saying that if...
But that is that is how I have been taught by the abbots to say. Okay? Now what I think, after all these years, what I think is, how could you miss a point? That's what I think, is how could you miss a point if your path has been accurate? If we are calling a Hinayanist meditator someone who is missing a point, then I agree with what the scholars say, right? But let's talk about a Hinayanist who doesn't stop there and who is absolutely a true Hinayanist in that the Shravaka hears accurately what the Buddha taught. Doesn't assume to become a Buddha himself, but listens and adheres to the teachings completely. I've always thought about it, and I thought, if you really worked at selflessness of self and really adhered to the teachings of the Four Noble Truths and really taught and learned the 12 Nidanas, backwards and forwards as the Pratyakas go about doing. For a time period, many could just remain in that moment. But I've always thought, should a person at that moment also have the innate wisdom, as we spoke about this morning, to say, oh, I am actually conceptualizing this a little bit here. I'm conceptualizing my suppression of emptiness. I'm forcing myself to remain in an emptiness that is not really free from my own clinging. Therefore, I need to liberate this also, could happen very easily. And I remember talking to my teachers. Khandro Rinpoche once in his teaching has said, for a person who comes to such a point of understanding, moving from just this realization to a greater realization that leads to absolute exhaustion is as simple as inhaling after an exhalation. And so, it's always, you have to keep in mind, someone who exhales, it's your fault if you're going to stop there, isn't it? Just as easily, reflex action of the exhalation, you take in the inhalation. In the same way, being able to see, oh, I have also suppressed something over here. I have conceptualized an emptiness of self by forcing myself to negate the external phenomena, and realizing what that true nature is a little bit of a deliberateness. May I let go of that deliberateness can very easily arise, because it's 99.9% of the work done already. So therefore, I think in the Hinayana and the authentic tradition of Hinayana, there's an absolute potential of being able to find absolute cessation without it have to be categorized as Mahayana or Vajrayana in that regard.
Yeah. I asked that in part because I've spent considerable time with a Theravada teacher.
No, it's a very wrong concept that we have. This is our bad habit of Vajrayanists and Mahayanists in sort of saying we are whatever it is, higher or greater or whatever we call it. That's a very big mistake we make. They're exceptional. I sometimes think, when we say I'm Mahayana, we are failures of Hinayana. And then when we say we are Vajrayana, then we are failed in Hinayana, failed in Mahayana, and now we are trying out the Vajrayana way. After this, there is nothing else to do, isn't it? And so you better make this one work at least.
Well, that was kind of my limited understanding with this great Theravada teacher, because when I would ask him these questions, to my limited understanding, he was presenting Dzogchen view.
Yes, it is. And if you look at the Zen masters, the method and yet the realization of the Zen masters is extraordinarily Dzogchen. In the Kwans or in their writings, if you look carefully, Sometimes we think, oh my, this is what Guru Rinpoche said, or this is what some of our great teachers in their pointing out instruction talk about, and it's the same kind of realization. So categorizing, whenever we say Mahayana, it is a great vehicle. It's an extraordinarily high vehicle because it allows even people like myself with such limited potential to also understand the absolute truth. And Vajrayana is supremely extraordinary because even the bluntest of the blunt mind is supposedly through Vajrayana able to understand what the superior minds of the Hinayana understood simply with the Four Noble Truths.
Thank you for saying that. When I've brought that up with other great Dzogchen teachers, they've almost gotten angry at me for not...
I've got that a lot too. But this is, again, it has to be correctly understood. We cannot praise Hinayana and sort of deprecate Mahayana and Dzogchen or Vajrayana. Neither can we praise Mahayana and Dzogchen and then not praise Hinayana. Because what we would be doing is we would be praising or not praising a technique. Whereas as a technique, all of them are equal in their importance and possibilities. People who handle that technique has to be taken into consideration. There are lots of Hinayanists who get totally stuck, and other than suppression of their emotions, they're not able to do anything else. And that's why Mahayanists at least have the possibility of going a little bit beyond that. And in that Mahayana has always been considered a great vehicle, as I said. So it has to be correctly understood. It cannot be one better than the other. Every method has a great possibility, however, dependent upon those who utilize it. There are exceptional beings who have attained arahatship through the Hinayana approach, that which through Dzogchen and Mahamudra teachings we cannot hope to obtain. And then yet in the Hinayana, there are many people who have sort of suppressed rather than liberated. That's the unfortunate path. In Mahayana and Vajrayana, innumerable beings have attained bodhisattvahood and enlightenment and exhaustion. And on the other hand, there are many people who have lived with Dzogchen their entire life, Mahayana with their entire life, and have not done anything better than the most ordinary person who's never met with any Dharma in their whole life.
May I ask part two?
Yes, continue.
In the Theravada teachings, they speak about the first wisdom experience entering the stream and certain fetters that are broken at that point. I think some of us, I might be wrong, have had a glimpse, actually experiential glimpse in body, speech, and mind of emptiness. But at least in my case, ignorance continues. There might be a period of time where whatever arises dissolves into awareness, but then one day it becomes more of a memory of the experience rather than moment-to-moment thought dissolving. What is the nature of the wisdom experience that I won't find myself in 2 minutes or 2 days or 2 weeks caught again? What is the quality of the experience that I'm not drawn back into my own ignorance?
Are you asking me what is it that would allow the permeating of the wisdom to remain more constant?
Or in the Vajrayana or Dzogchen teaching, is there a nature of, the Theravada lays it out more clearly to me about this first and wisdom experience, nirvanic experience, this is what happens, but the work continues. I haven't seen as clearly in the Dzogchen. It's more like get accustomed to it. There's pointing out instruction. Sometimes the implication is if you really got pointing out instruction, that's it.
No. That's incorrect. I wish it was, but no. What good is a pointing out and having got some glimpse if there is no merging within it, and if it doesn't become pervasive?
But what is the nature other than becoming more and more accustomed to returning to that wisdom? What is the difference of the quality of the wisdom experience that there's more personal release than what I've experienced?
There are two things, I think. One is, such as in the Dzogchen tradition, the pointing out is very important. Having gotten a glimpse, it is said, having gotten a glimpse, allowing yourself to then prolong the glimpse, make it frequent and prolong it, and until there is a seamlessness of that experience. This is usually called arousing the guru within. This is the term that is used. And that is being able to, in that moment of having, in your own meditation, glimpsed a certain, let's say, wisdom mind, or whether it is through a pointing out instruction, you get a glimpse, or whether we say from one breath to the next breath, you see a gap, or you see a certain sense of expanse. Whatever experience, brief as it may happen, to become familiar with it, to make it sort of repeated, continuity of it. And then the continuity being so that there is a seamlessness, and you're able to abide within a seamlessness of that meditative experience. This is then the word that is used as nyam, or meditative experience, that is used. Then this then would be is if one is very powerful in one's own potential and is able to generate or arouse within oneself one's own teacher, as we say, your own Buddha mind is aroused. However, in the case of people with lesser potential, then such a glimpse must be, even if it is not often happening, or you're not able to gain any other experience other than that very brief moment, based upon the confidence of that taste of that moment, it strengthens your possibilities of your being able to let go. And so that is dismantling what is not for what is to manifest in its own self. And it's a longer process. But that is again the second method that is applied, where we say simply let go of everything other than that which is the very natural nature. And so in that way, all the elaborate systems of purification, all the elaborate systems of creation and completion leading to Trekchö and Togel, the 6 yogas and so forth, are antidotal methods that allows the dismantling of every fabricated creation to fall apart until no layer of fabrication remains other than the pristine nature. So these are two approaches that is taken. Therefore, in many of the Dzogchen teachings, you will find certain lineages which emphasize not doing anything but remaining, and certain teachers who will expect you to go through a rigors of many levels of yogas to get to the point. Primarily, the Nyingma and the Kagyu differ in these two systems. That's why. Is that in the Nyingma, you will find a lot more emphasis to stay, get there, just to remain. And the Kagyus will ask you to dismantle, and nothing but the truth will remain. And the Nyingmas tend to say the dismantling itself is a little bit more conceptual. Therefore, just try to remain. This is where the Mahamudra and the Dzogchen differ a little bit. I don't know whether it answers your question.
I think it did. It's just keep working.
Yes, because if your questioning is about a clue, then these are the two traditions. A clue, a quick clue. Then these are the two traditions that I've studied within. So these are the two things I've gotten from my teacher. Myself, I don't know.
What?
Myself, I don't know. My own personal experience, I don't know. From my teachers, I've heard these two methods.
Well, thank you, but I think you have more personal experience than you're admitting.
I have no idea. This whole thing about what is the primordial truth? Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Or yes.
Rinpoche, in these two different processes that you just described here, it's I have less experience than definitely both of you, and probably most people in the room. But it sounds to me like there's a danger of grasping. Is that true?
Yeah, everywhere, every place, every moment.
Yeah, because this instruction of you see a glimpse and build on it, like it would, to me at least, it would. I mean, I've seen glimpses of things. I'm sure it's probably not this that we're talking about, but these. And I was told once that I'm becoming my own meditation instructor. I don't know if this is true, but that would be nice. But you know, then yeah, you think of this experience you've had that does feel like, you know, this great having a good session, like you mentioned, right? And it becomes really important then to not try to have that again. But then this instruction that you're talking about sounds almost like you're also being told to aspire to that. So, I mean, where's the middle ground, you know?
No, the middle ground is not necessary here because there's no contradiction.
Okay.
Because I think often in a sort of a situation such as this, we go from one topic to the other a little bit too quickly.
Okay.
I said this earlier also, deliberate expectations of meditation, deliberateness in meditation, conceptualization of meditation, in the beginner's level is perfectly all right, you know, even if there is a deliberate projection of an experience and conceptualization of that experience, whether it is delight or non-delight, whatever it may be, is fine. Very often, meditators put on a very unrealistic expectation on their own meditation. So if you and I are here having a conversation about almost not having any sort of grasping or any kind of clinging, we're talking at a level where the meditator is supposedly progressed to quite a higher sort of ability or potential at that point. Those of them who have through the years progressed to such a point where they are brave enough to say, I'm going to work with the subtlest of the subtle non-clinging, then that makes it possible and it is relevant to such people.
Okay.
Some of us who may be very newer into Buddhism, or those who do not have so many years of Buddhism maybe, but not much experience and strengthened meditation, for them then to assume that because non-deliberateness and non-clinging is being said, that you are going to apply it to your current meditation, may be being overly optimistic at this point. And so earlier this morning we talked about 3 levels of meditation. There is the mundane meditation that has to progress by supported with the meaning revealing meditation until it can then be better refined through the 4 samadhis. Upon the completion of the 4th samadhi, then we are talking about something as what we just had a conversation about, no subtle trace of any clinging and so on and so forth. And until that is reached, then you have to say, where am I at this moment? That is something for next moment or next day or next year, whenever you're going to go there. At this moment, what I would be nice is to just have a peaceful session of not having too many thoughts. So in this moment, not having too many thoughts or analyzing the thoughts so that I can eliminate the not necessary thoughts, this is what I can do truly and clearly, then practice that. Even if it looks deliberate and a lot of clinging is happening, a lot of discriminating is happening, it's perfectly fine. So that's why they are in different levels, and so since that, there is no contradiction as such.
Thank you.
Yes, Ashley?
I have a question about the Fourth Noble Truth. How does the Eightfold Path lead to cessation and not just...
Eightfold Path is path that leads to cessation.
But how does it lead to cessation and not just being good?
You have to rightly understand. If the Eightfold Path leads to cessation of ignorance, then it is right Eightfold Path. If it is not leading to cessation of ignorance, but building up some layer of concepts, then you have to go into a much more deeper understanding of the emptiness of self and phenomena before it becomes pristine or very pure Eightfold Path. That is why you will find mention of Eightfold Path in the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma, and it is also the last thing that is mentioned in the second turning of the wheel of Dhamma. Among all the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, Eightfold Path is enumerated as the 29th through 37th practice of a Bodhisattva. And last of the Eightfold Path is perfect equanimity, right equanimity. And that right equanimity is said to be that which is without any grasping, any clinging. The 37th practice of the Bodhisattva, achieved only when you are able to obtain the first bhumi, at least at that moment. And therefore, at such a moment, the cessation truly arises. In that equanimity, when you rest in the last Eightfold Path, perfect equanimity, there is no clinging, no grasping. No clinging, no grasping, because there is an absolute exhaustion of any misconception, ignorance, or duality. And at that moment, the 12 nidanas are completely exhausted. Ignorance is completely exhausted. And the mind no longer creates the second nidana formations. And therefore, it's completely, all conditioning factor, consciousness, as well as name and form are completely dismantled. Ignorance is not generated, and that is called sort of dismantling of the 12 nidanas, and therefore it becomes cessation. Do you get it? No? Let me put it another way, simple way is, if you are going to do the Eightfold Path, right, you're going to have right thought, right speech, right action, right mindfulness, right concentration, right livelihood, right action, right concentration. All of these different rightful things that you are doing, and doing it if there is deliberateness, isn't it? Such as what we try to do. We try to have right thought, view, speech, action. But how right is it? It's a little bit deliberate. Why is it deliberate? It's because it's still clinging. We're clinging to the idea of right and wrong. We're clinging to the idea of what to accept, what to reject. Therefore, outwardly, it can be given the name of rightful path, but it is not the actual rightful path, because this is rightful path free from kleshas, but not necessarily free from ignorance.
But how would you use those 8 to get to the right one? The
right one, then you have to first work with the 37 practices. You have to go right from the top. To simplify that is, in the mind of the meditator, as you look at what the Buddha's teachings are, and probably with this I can conclude over here also a little bit, is for the generation of the wisdom, for example, Nagarjuna here says, is necessary in adopting these 5 qualities as the aspects of the wisdom, perfection of the wisdom, but the wisdom that arises through knowing selflessness of self and selflessness of phenomena. Everything is emptiness. What is emptiness? And again, not necessary to elaborate for you all. You've studied this subject so very often times. But again, in a simple way, it's being said, other than mind's own assumptions and fabrications that there is there a reality of anything other than our assuming it to be so? If we take our own expectations and assumptions out of the picture, what is the reality of anything that we are relating to? And therefore, the power of the existence of every phenomena, even our own thoughts and emotions, our mental patterns, are also based upon hope of its existence. We think, and therefore that thinking, the power of the thinking, makes it real. If you go into seeing, we find everything is just a gathering of many aggregates, many different elements. It's a compositeness. So emptiness of phenomena is easy to understand, knowing that ultimately there is no independent, solid entity. Mind also is very easy to find its emptiness, selflessness, because other than our having given it a name, there is no solid structure that can be eventually, ultimately known to be solidly existent. And so emptiness of self and phenomena, when it's up to you how long it takes for you to really gain the certainty of emptiness of self and phenomena. If with sort of, let's say, higher potential of just teachers saying it, you say, oh yes, it makes sense, therefore I have no longer a clinging to self and phenomena, then that's very fine. Otherwise, 12 nidanas, the 18 elements, the 5 aggregates, being able to practice them completely, and then engaging, especially in the practices of the Bodhisattva's path. Why is it considered to be is these 5 paths, or what are considered the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, like the Eightfold Path, are challenges. The best word for these teachings and practices is challenges. Challenge to yourself to see how accurate and deep and precise is your understanding of the view of emptiness of self and phenomena. If you really think, oh yes, where is mind? Mind is empty, mind is empty, mind is empty. Sometimes we come up with this belief that, oh yes, I think I know mind is empty. I think I know phenomena is empty. We Mahayanists look at Hinayanists and say, you don't know the phenomena is empty. I know the phenomena is empty. We sort of show off in that regard. But then when you implement the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, you find, oh, my theoretical intellectual understanding of emptiness of self and phenomena is actually very weak. In that the next big thing happens, I'm completely scared out of my wits and I cling to them, I grasp to them, I fear, I have insecurity, I have hope. And therefore, in that way, you begin to take the challenges of the Bodhisattva path or the Eightfold Path and find how weak or strong your understanding of emptiness of self and phenomena is. When the meditator accepting the challenges through engaging fully into the path of Bodhisattvas, and when you really, your actions become nothing but the Eightfold Path, your actions and body, speech, and mind becomes nothing but the 37 practices, and you do it beautifully. You do it fluidly. You do it without any difficulty. You do it without any fabrication or force or conceptualization. Why? Is because it becomes your natural skin, as we say. Natural skin because you know it's emptiness of self and emptiness of phenomena. In your own mind, as you deepen in meditation, the idea and the understanding of emptiness, that strengthened awareness of the emptiness brings about a strong, spontaneous manifestation of those that are nothing but loving kindness, compassion, mindfulness is the 5 powers, the 5 forces, or the 7 limbs of enlightenment, Eightfold Path, all these 37 practices becomes just a natural thing. At that moment, it doesn't matter whether there's 37 or 57, or whether they're just 7 in number or 16 in number. That they are, like every pore of your skin exudes with nothing but a bodhisattva attitude and conduct, is where inwardly, not only in theory, but that inward realization externally manifests as emptiness, realization of emptiness of self and phenomena. That is then called fullness of the realization of bodhicitta. True selflessness, true bodhicitta, true compassion, bodhisattvahood. And in that moment, when that realization arises, there is no Eightfold Path to practice. Your view becomes nothing but the view of the truth. Therefore, your body's action becomes nothing but selfless. Your speech has no more any clinging or no grasping at all. Your thoughts become nothing but genuine kind thoughts. Your livelihood, or whatever you do, becomes nothing but a bodhisattva manifestation. Your mindfulness becomes nothing but the mindfulness of the absolute truth. Your concentration becomes nothing but the concentration of the nature of suchness. And the action becomes nothing but the permeating action of a bodhisattva. That is where it is counted as 8, but it's actually 1, non-clinging to self at all. Then that is called actualization of the Eightfold Path.
So until then, Eightfold Path might be more like an obstacle course.
No, not necessarily. In other words, you could say is there is a sort of a very conceptual Eightfold Path. You should follow them. In that case, it would be more disciplines on the path of practice. Then as you progress with all the different levels of maturity of your own understanding, then you thin the layer of conceptual understanding of the Eightfold Path until Eightfold Path becomes unique and indivisible within the realization of absolute truth.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you speak about selflessness in relation to how we relate to being the target of aggression or jealousy or whatever other forms?
That is then, again, a little different kind of selflessness, I think, if I may say so, because Again, just as Michelle's question about non-grasping, there are levels that you have to understand as what you're capable of doing. You may, if one is really developed as a meditator, not have to struggle with selflessness so much. There is never such a thing as I am going to be selfless. You have to be selfless. That's a little bit different. When one is in a situation where one is faced with anger or aggression or difficulties that are sort of obstacles directed towards yourself, I would say use basic awareness more than emptiness at that moment. And so everything is a delusion, everything is an emptiness. If you're capable of thinking in that way, then that's different. For example, if someone was being very aggressive to one of our teachers, very oftentimes I've seen them not have any problems with it because their mind is cultivated and developed to such a degree that there is no, sort of pain or fear or any kind of difficulty that they experience. So they are able to let go of it very easily. You and I don't have that kind of capacity at the moment. Therefore, being able to be mindful of your own potential and in accordance to the potential that you have, if you react, that would make more sense. So some people, Buddhists, very oftentimes they do that. Oh, I have to really see it as an illusion or be able to really, that's also the same question is that suffering is illusion, but I'm feeling this suffering, and how am I going to look at it as an illusion? These questions do arise because people do not relate to a situation according to their potential, but they relate to it according to what they aspire to have as a potential. There's a difference. And so keeping things short here, I would say is if you are sometimes subject to somebody else's aggression, rather than being able to see it as emptiness or selflessness, I would say be patient. That's very important. Be patient and stay away from trouble. Wisdom, compassionate wisdom is very, very important. Yes? And then hope. Later on, you can develop such a selflessness that you're in the middle of aggression and not affected by it.
So I've experienced many moments where, especially coming straight from sitting, walking out of Shambhala Center and having someone come right at me, yelling and threatening to attack me, where I've handled it.
Well, recite
perfectly.
mantras, be patient. Recite mantras, be patient. Think about a slogan immediately. These are very deliberate methods and not as powerful as immediately being able to dissolve into the natural expanse of Dhammata, but better at that moment. There are three things you can do. Liberate it into the natural expanse of emptiness, see the other as the Yidam deity in manifestation, or be patient. And you see, which capacity do I have at this moment? Which works best? No method or technique is better or more advanced than the other. The best is that which comes immediately and is the most easy for you at that moment, that keeps you away from creating negative actions. That's the best method, always. Okay.
So I'm creating them?
Creating negative actions. If you are angry, for example, you try to let go, but nevertheless you're not successful and you get more irritated and you retaliate, for example, then you create a bigger obstacle for yourself. And therefore, in search of something very high or what you assume is a very high technique, sometimes that you're not capable of doing, may backfire in creating greater damage to yourself than is necessary at that moment. So patience may not sound as dramatic as letting go, but may work better for you at this moment.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. Here. Pass it on. Oh, Michelle keeps it.
Thank you, Rinpoche. My question is about mantra, and I'd like to know at what point...
About what?
Mantra.
Mantra.
At one point, the meditators are given mantra or recommended for them to use it, and who you get it from. Thank you.
If you've been given, mantras are very, very powerful, very beneficial. One definition of mantra can be called seed of virtue. It is like planting seeds. And so much so that they say, even if you do not understand what you are reciting, but if you recite mantras that are heard, simply the hearing of the sound of the mantra is able to really bring about a planting of the seed of Dharma in the mind stream of many, many sentient beings. So you have to reflect upon the value of mantras. And then also for one's own self, and the purification of speech is very, very important. I always encourage meditators to carry a mala with them and do mantras. If you really must use your tongue so much, then I would always say use it for mantras. Keeps you away from a lot of problems always. And so I think it's very important. But of course, certain mantras are for certain reasons. And many teachers, probably you're asking that question, is many teachers give you mantras. In the context of also receiving initiations and blessings, they say something like, if you're not able to keep the samaya, at least do the mantras or something like that. Then one should do the mantras, but be mindful of what it is that you are accumulating. Say Tara mantra or Chenrezig mantra or Vajraguru mantra, that those that are more commonly practiced by people can be done without very elaborate visualizations or very elaborate formats of the practices or liturgies, simply reciting the mantra, but being mindful of Guru Rinpoche or Tara, whichever deity you are doing, some amount of presence and gaining the blessings from them. This is very important. Then again, numbers. Again, what I've always find is people get a little bit obsessive about the numbers a little bit, and so that's not so good. People do things like 3 mantras of each deity, or this is odd things like I did 40 mantras, and I can't understand why they wouldn't stop at 21 or then take it up to 50 or some 40. There's a sort of counting every number that they do. I did 67.5 prostrations. Sort of being almost very much like very clever businessmen when they count every percentage of everything. That attitude in regard to mantra shouldn't be done. There's a sense of permeating of the sound and the awareness of the sound that is necessary. And if you have committed to a certain number, then it is necessary to count. If you have not committed to a certain number, meditators must keep it very fluid, as common as your breath. Whenever you find you are gaining your concentration a little bit, bring about a little bit awareness of the mantra, or let the mantra bring your awareness into becoming more strong, and recite them with no definite number or counting of the numbers. Anything else?
So the mantra is used for post-meditation.
Mantra can be used for post-meditation too. It's a very useful method or a tool for post-meditation concentration.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes? To limit what we mean by mind to just a location, whether it is centralized at the heart or whether it is more the thinking capacity of the brain, is almost not appreciating the term mind completely. Since mind is considered to be the holder, the basis, it is almost similar to the space holding everything. It's formless, but it holds everything. When we locate it to heart, as I was saying earlier, it is an aspect of mind, is that much of our human culture is such that we sort of feel emotions, feelings, sensations. And these have much to do with the heart. From the Buddhist perspective, I would say the closest thing we have that can be called heart is rhythm of the heart that is influenced by the breath, and the most fundamental sense organ that we have besides mind, which is the eyes that are connected to the heart. In the higher traditions of yoga, of meditation, such as in the Dzogchen tradition, we place a lot of importance to what is called the 2 oceans. And the 2 eyes are called the 2 oceans. And it is said that the 2 oceans are connected to the crystal, which usually is meant another way for saying the heart. And so we say the connection, there's a very subtle nadi that connects the ocean with the heart, crystal heart, with the crystal heart. And because of that connection, much of our perceptions arises from the functioning of this particular channel. That is very prominently given. And yet the vibrancy, the aliveness of this particular nadi is brought about by breath. And so this is more in the context of yogas and the sort of working with nadis and pranas, wind and the different channels and chakras of our body. So in that context, we do say breath influences a rhythm, which rhythm creates a vibrancy of the heart that comes out through the eyes, the senses of the eyes, that builds up perceptions. And so we say the reality of the perception is the functioning of these factors. And so in that context, you can say perceptions have much to do with emotions, with feelings, with sensations, with our different kinds of mental patterns that are there. And therefore, it is considered very important. But when we talk in the context of mind, then it's a lot more subtler than just these gross aspects. And so likewise of the brain also, then there are many factors of the brain that are also considered to be part of the crown chakra, for example, that feeds into the levels of energies. And at the same time, when we talk about mind, we say these are aspects of the mind and not really fullness of the mind. Okay? Then continue.
I really like what you just said, and I'm taking that in. I guess in the West, the heart is used as a seat of subjectivity and individuality, and to say this is me, and I use it to authenticate my decisions and also motivate me on the path. Is that a problem?
I think little difference seems to be in the position of where you place heart. If you place heart as only the organ heart, then it's not so correct, although it is connected to it. When we say heart, we are talking about a core point, not necessarily the flesh, the whole organ, but a core point that is struck or striking some kind of a frequency, to use doctor's word here, or just some sense of power point that is enclosed in our own body, and that sets up sort of rhythm or vibrations. And so today in the enormous exploration between the scientists and the Buddhist meditators that is happening is to try and see a whole new, I think, vocabulary that being built up, where all the different neuroscience terminologies can actually have relevance to what is being talked about in the text. And so when we talk about heart, we usually say feelings. For example, in the nidanas, in the context of the 12 nidanas, we talk about senses, contact, craving, grasping. These are the different levels that we talk about. So when you say heart, you're only talking about some aspects of it. Whereas in the context of mind, you would say, where do these come from? Where does the craving come from? And if you say heart, then the problem that happens is you will have to localize it. And if you localize it, you can't find it there. So when you go beyond, you say, yes, it is the heart, but there is also a greater energy beyond the local point of a heart, then the term mind comes into being. So it's almost like saying the pervasiveness of the mind holds a facet that can be in the form of a heartfelt wish, isn't it? So the heart generates a sensation of an aspiration or an emotion of happiness or sadness. And it triggers the flesh heart, beating the rhythm brought about by the breath. And so it's a very important factor, of course, but it is not a complete factor in that it has to come from somewhere. And when you search for the origin, ultimately you come to a point where there is no form, but nevertheless it's very, very strong, and temporarily we are going to call it mind. So ultimately, even that term mind becomes very problematic. And that's how Madhyamika was born, is that, Chittamatrins, the third highest Buddhist philosophical school, called it mind. And Madhyamikans said, you call it heart, you call it mind, it's the same problem. You've given it a name. So we're not going to call it a name. but it is still very powerful. So they say form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is nothing other than form, and then they stop over there. And so our whole life is spent as Buddhists trying to figure out, so what is it? Some say mind, some say two truth, some say the unique truth, some say all ground, some call it consciousness, some call it primordial wisdom, space, dhammata, emptiness, primordial nature, who knows? Many, many different names. But ultimately and temporarily here, what we do mean is the fundamental basis upon which there is the power of play, and the power of the play or the power of the movement, that which has the possibility of creating rhythms. Rhythms that affect the heart, rhythms that affect the points of our body and our brain, which propels our senses, sense organs, sense consciousness into action. And it would be nice if the actions were created and nothing more happened. But the Buddhists then say, not only do you create actions, but there is a karmic consequence of those actions. And then abandoning the negative karma, cultivating the positive karma, and all that complexity was born out of that.
Thank you.
It's a never-ending topic. Yes.
Rinpoche, I've just finished working for a neuroscience lab on campus who is looking for the place in the brain where, in the mind, in the brain, where this is going to be found. What do you think they're going to find?
Yes. Did you find anything?
Well, I was the one that was supposed to socially intimidate people in order to see what effect that would have in the brain, and so that was my job.
Yes, they've been poking and prodding a lot of meditators' brains these days, trying to see, and I think they've learned a lot, and that's very good.
Yeah.
If there are similarities, and there must be, and there are similarities of science and Buddhist philosophy, and particularly when it can, because of the power of science and education of science, if that can bring about inspiration for students of science to learn about working with your own mind and to be able to train your own mind, that would be very good. That's the whole purpose of Buddha Dharma. And so you become a good human being and you realize your human potential of kindness and goodness from a religious perspective. That's also very good. If you do it from out of the perspective of science and the science convinces you, then that is also very good. And that's, what the Buddhist doctrine would always hope for. Yeah. Okay, so science of mind is probably what we can stop here with, and then the Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, a very sort of valuable, almost one of the indispensable Mahayana texts that are there of Nagarjuna, and it is very well worked, and many varieties of translations are available. And so I hope people will continue to explore it, continue to study it. And the remarkable sort of quality of the text itself is that it almost reads as a list of things to do and list of things not to do. And so that's one of the beautiful things about it. As I said in the first talk, sometimes it doesn't seem to be as poetically descriptive. It's very much listed. But on the other hand, in today's busy world where lesser said and done more is always kind of the idea of the day, ideology of the people who live in today's society, I hope that in your studies you see clearly what are the qualities that need to be cultivated and what are the qualities that need to be abandoned, without which primarily one cannot hope to bring about fruition of Dhamma practice in this life. However, of the summarization, the most important thing is to make sure, no matter which level of practice you are doing, whether you are a Buddhist or not a Buddhist, still the subject matters of the Four Noble Truths, 4 immeasurables, 6 paramitas, and then the 4 reminders are emphasized as very, very essential. If the fundamental 4 reminders, 4 immeasurables, and the 4 noble truth is cultivated and you deepen your understanding of it, anything else that is there to be studied and learned within Buddha Dharma will all seemingly just sort of fall in place. It's almost like doing a jigsaw puzzle. and you find that there are some crucial pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Once you get that, almost fitting in every other piece becomes quite more simple. Likewise, if the Four Noble Truths, Four Immeasurable in your meditation, and then leading to the generation of wisdom through really realizing one's own innate nature, and therefore four reminders really support this innate nature and bring your mind into a much more clearer understanding of the Four Noble Truths. That is then the crucial main picture, and anything else you will find meaning to why you are doing the things, the reason why you are doing the other things, closing the gap between the view and the action. Everything comes together. These crucial subjects are missing, and if they are missing from your understanding, and if one is not exerting effort in learning, contemplating, and being able to really understand them a little bit more, then I really think no matter how many practices we try to do, there will always be a lot of pieces that are missing, and we won't be able to really get a complete picture of what it is that we're supposed to be working with. And so all these years, despite all the difficulties, you all exert effort and are extremely devoted to the path of practice. That's very good. But that it is not similar to a blindfolded person running around a room trying to find his or her way out, that it doesn't resemble this analogy, but that you have the possibility of using sight to take the blindfold off and say, oh, I've been running around in circles, door is just next to me, and knowing how to open the door and then go outside. Likewise, with these fundamental topics and building them up in your own realization, that exertion and the effort that you are putting into the path of practice will undoubtedly bring fruition, and one will find a cessation of samsara and the causes of suffering, and suffering of samsara for yourself and for all sentient beings. And so it's a very precious life. Guard it, be really careful with it, recognize what it really means to be a Dhamma practitioner, and work hard in bringing full fruition to this lifetime. So as I always say, lots of hard work has gone this far. Then only one or two doubts and hesitation, powerful enough yet to destroy all the years and lifetimes of hard work, is a terrible waste of opportunity, terrible waste of time. Many, many different things that need to be done and should be done, would be done. If it happens, it's very good. If it doesn't happen, it's not a big loss. But that you have met with the Dhamma, this opportunity should never be wasted at all. So wherever you are, whichever Dhamma center you belong to, whichever teacher student you are, whichever lineage you may be in, whether you like a formatted religion or do not like a formatted religion, doesn't matter, so long as you work with Four Noble Truths, Four Immeasurables, and the Four Reminders. So that's your homework for life. Okay? So.